How does someone book up?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah. We had collected a hadith that relates to al-ahkam. So this book is of the topic of ahadith al-ahkam that relates to the halal and haram and acts of ibadat. So as we are going through this book, we're in Kitab al-Tahara and we're in the Bab al-Wudu, discussing concerning a hadith that author rahimahullah mentioned pertaining to ahkam al-wudu, regarding how to perform wudu and matters pertaining to al-wudu. So today we'll be continuing by discussing a hadith that is mentioned by the hadith of Abu Hurairah regarding some other aspects regarding ahkam al-wudu. So the hadith will be read and then we go through concerning explaining the hadith and commenting upon the hadith. Tafaddal.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Hadith number 35. The chapter of wudu. Narrated Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when one of you wakes up from his sleep, he must not put his hand in the utensil till he has washed it 3 times, for he does not know where his hand was while he slept. Agreed upon, and this is Muslim's wording.
So here author rahimahullah mentioned again concerning another hadith that relates to ahkam al-wudu. And this hadith is by the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Then he mentioned of Prophet as stated in hadith, إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فلا يغمس يده في إناء حتى يغسلها 3 فإنه لا يدري أين بات يده متفق عليه وهذا لفظ للمسلم. So he mentioned regarding concerning this hadith that have been read, that the hadith relates to the matter regarding washing of the hands. So the hadith relates to washing of the hands regarding al-wudu. So he mentioned hadith mutafaqun alayh. So we have before mentioned regarding the Sahabi al-Jalil Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Then as for what he mentioned here regarding the hadith, regarding the source of the hadith with the hadith in the Bukhari and Muslim, as he referred to as mutafaqun alayh. And he mentioned وَهَذَا لَفْظ Muslim. As for the wording that is mentioned here is the wording that can be found in Sahih Muslim. So you have different wording of the hadith, but the wording that you have mentioned here is the wording of Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So as for what is mentioned regarding at-takhrij in brief regarding other sources or the sources that have mentioned this hadith or the books of hadith, that Sheikh al-Fahl have mentioned, Sheikh Mahir have mentioned regarding concerning this hadith is he mentioned akhrajahu ash-Shafi'i fi musnadihi, and also Ahmed, also the hadith in the Bukhari wa Muslim, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, Bayhaqi. So these are the sources that he have cited that this hadith can be found in some of in these sources. So again, Imam Shafi rahimahullah in his Al-Musnad, Ahmed in his Musnad, Bukhari in his Sahih, Imam Muslim in his Sahih. Also the hadith can be found in Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, also At-Tirmidhi in his Al-Jami', Ibn Khuzaymah in his Sahih, Ibn Hibban also in his Sahih, and also Al-Bayhaqi. So these are the sources that Sheikh that I've mentioned here, Sheikh Al-Fahl, who have made the tahqiq of this book. So he mentioned these as some of the sources. But also that, as we have mentioned, that his method regarding this particular muhaqqiq, that whenever he mentioned the takhrij of the hadith or cite some of the sources of the hadith, that he'll mention them based upon certain order of concerning that, the order concerning the time of a chronological order regarding when they have died. So you have mentioned him concerning in a chronological order regarding when they have died. So you mentioned Shafi, Ahmed, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, Bayhaqi, based upon the time of their death. So that's concerning the system or the method that he follows in this book. But as for the method that, as for others who have mentioned a different method, which is Allahu Alam, that may be a more preferred method regarding, as first, for him to mention the sources that have been mentioned by the author, the original author was Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So he mentioned muttafaqun alayh. So first to mention or cite a hadith based upon the hadith found in Bukhari and Muslim, then he can add other sources as done by others, such as Halak. So regarding his tahqiq of the book. So other sources. So as for the hadith, that it can be said a hadith rawahu Bukhari wa Muslim. This narration of the hadith is cited in Sahih. This narration is mentioned here is in Sahih Muslim. Also, those that mention hadith, they mention that also Imam Malik rahimahullah in his book Al-Muwatta, Imam Shafi rahimahullah in his book Al-Um, and also in the Musnad that is attributed to him. Also the hadith can be found. Also Ahmed in his Musnad. The hadith also in the Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, others that I mentioned, Nasa'i, also Ad-Darimi, and others. So you find also and he mentioned there Al-Bayhaqi, also Ad-Daraqutni. So these are the other sources. So many sources have narrated this hadith. So you have many sources that have narrated this particular hadith, and the hadith as mentioned that found in Bukhari and Muslim. Just as something I note to add regarding concerning, for those who wish to, regarding concerning and look into hadith further regarding these books that are said to be books of ahadith al-ahkam. So those books that are compiled, that give us a a compilation of ahadith that relates to ahkam regarding mutasarat. So you have a book that is called Al-Gharam bi Adilat al-Ahkam, and this is written by one of the students of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, where in his book he mentioned, when he mentioned this hadith, he started this hadith being the first hadith that he mentioned. So in this collection, or in this particular book, that is the first hadith that is mentioned, where he mentioned that يستيقظ أحدكم من نومه فلا يغمس يده في إناء حتى يغسلها ثلاثا فإنه لا يدري أين بات يده. And he mentioned أخرجاه من حديث البخاري مسلم إلا لفظ الثلاثة فالمسلم وحده. So he mentioned that one, this hadith is in the Bukhari and Muslim, the wording ثلاثة, where it mentioned that should wash one's hands 3 times. That's narration in the Sahih Muslim. As for the narration in the Bukhari, that there's no mention of washing the hands 3 times. So Bukhari mentioned one should wash the hands, but without per se putting a number of times. As for Imam Muslim, his narration, when he mentioned hadith, it mentioned that one should yagsalaha thalathan, that one should wash the hands 3 times. So as for so they mentioned that also you find that the narration of Ibn Majah and also at Tirmidhi, where it mentioned that their narration, it states, إِذَا إِسْتَيْقَظَ أَحَدُكُمْ, if any of you should awake from sleep, مِنَ اللَّيْلِ, from the night, فَلَا يَدْخِلْ يَدَهُ فِي إِنَاءٍ, one should not place one hands in the ina, in the vessel, حَتَّى يَفْرِغَ عَلَيْهَا مَرَّتَيْنِ أَوْ ثَلَاثًا, until one have washed them twice or 3 times. So that's the narration in that Ibn Majah with Tirmidhi. So it mentioned, if any of you was to awake from the night, he should not place his hands in a vessel for wudu until he has washed them, or until pour water over them twice or 3 times. So they show that the hadith is some narration mentioned either twice or 3 times regarding numbers. That and you have a slight difference in the narration of Imam Malik in the أحدكم لا يدري أين بات أو أين كانت يطوف يده. So a slight difference in wording regarding to the hadith. The wording generally is the same. Where he mentioned in the Ibn Ibn, he mentioned فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين كانت يطوف يده. That so that's concerning the wording in Ibn Majah. When at the end it mentioned, because none of you know exactly where his hands was moving, going around while at the night. So that's concerning that particular hadith regarding the various wordings. There are some of the wordings, difference in wording of the hadith, the difference in wording of the hadith. So as for what can be taken from regarding concerning this hadith, so I mentioned regarding takhrij of the hadith. As for the general meaning of the hadith, as for the general meaning of this hadith, then what can be said, as mentioned by Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, when he mentioned this particular hadith. As for the wording, he mentioned min nawmihi, that regarding concerning that the person is not to carry certain action until, they mentioned concerning until, regarding for those who woke up from sleep. They mentioned فَلَا يَغْمِسْ, meaning concerning at some that they mentioned that this to tell the person that what is meant by they mentioned فَلَا يَغْسِلْ, that one should not place his hands directly into the water vessel. Or some mentioned one should not يَدْخِلْ, one should not put one hand into the vessel directly. So all these have similar meaning. So the person, فَلَا يَغْمِسْ, one should not dip his hand into the water vessel. Or some mention وَلَا يَدْخِلْ, one should not place one hand into the vessel. So that's concerning what is intended. So that is what is intended regarding the person not to place his hands directly into the water vessel until he has washed them away from it 3 times, as mentioned in this narration of Imam Muslim. So they mentioned regarding concerning that, as for what is mentioned that concerning يغسل يده, that one should not wash his hands inside the vessel. So they mentioned here concerning يده, what is meant by al-yad, regarding concerning the entire hand, but up to the wrist. So up to the wrist is what is meant, so the person up to the wrist, that is what is intended regarding what portion of the hand should be washed. So not what is intended, the entire arm, but just up to the wrist, then that's the area a person should not place into the water vessel. And I mentioned ina, so what is meant by concerning ina al-wadu. So ina al-wadu, which is concerning water, the vessel that contains water for performing wudu. So that's the vessel, that is the purpose of performing wudu. The person should not place his hands directly into this water container. They mentioned also by extension, if this applies regarding wudu, then by extension also will be included, would be also ghusl. So also the same thing would apply to ghusl, the water that is used for performing a complete wash of ghusl. Then also a person is not to do so by placing the hands before washing them away from the vessel. So they mentioned, as we mentioned, some narration mentioned حتى يغسلها ثلاثا, that يغسلها, that a person should until he has washed his hands 3 times. So they mentioned that, he mentioned adad, which is 3 times, the person to go through this 3 times. We mentioned that and state that in some of the narration in the Ibn Majah would tell, they mention twice or 3 times. So a person should wash his hands multiple times. Then that is what is mentioned in the hadith. So as for the mention, فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ, that also mentioned that the end of the hadith, that a person should carry out this act because he does not know as to where he placed his hands while he was asleep. So he doesn't know where his hands was moving, or where he placed his hand, or what his hands they may have touched while he was sleeping, whether something which is pure or impure. So based upon this, that can somewhat explain regarding that a person is unaware regarding where his hands were while he was asleep. So based upon this, he should wash them away from the vessel before they are placed inside of the vessel. So that's concerning the general meaning of the hadith. So as for the ahkam that can be taken from the hadith, as for what are the rulings that can be taken from the hadith. So the first thing the ulama they discuss from this hadith is regarding hukum ghusl yadayn inda istikhadh min al-nawm. So the person, the first ruling regarding that, the person regarding washing of the hands away from the vessel after awaking from sleep. So after a person awake from sleep, that a person should wash his hands. Is this something, wash the hands first before place them into the vessel, the water vessel? Is this hukum regarding washing the hands? Is this something which is, the ulama, is this something which is wajib, is it a must to be done, or is it something which is mustahab? So the ulama have a discussion regarding the hukum regarding washing the hands. As mentioned in the hadith, before one place one hand into the vessel, is this something which is wajib or something which is mustahab? So there's a qawlan on this matter. So there's qawlan on this matter. So you have 2 views of the ulama on this matter. The first of the view is that qawl al-awwal, the first of the view of the ulama, that an-nahi, as what is stated in hadith, that one should not fala yaghmis, that one should not dip one hands into the water vessel. The ulama of those who mention that no, this matter is regarding an-nahi huna. This nahi is something which is karahiyah. It is relating to something which is disliked to be done. So I take the view that it is something which is disliked to place the hand directly into the water, but it is by way of the command here, it is something which is preferred to be done. So they mentioned that to wash the hands away from the container, outside the container, it is something which is preferred to be done, but it is not wajib. It is preferred to be done, but it is not something which is wajib to be done. And so the nahi here, the person being told not to do so by way of something nahi regarding karahiyah. It is dislike for the person to do so, and it's preferred that a person wash his hands away from the vessel before putting his hand directly into the vessel. And that's the view taken by Jumhur of the ulama. So that first position, this first view, it is taken by majority of the ulama, that that the person, it is disliked for a person to place his hand directly into the vessel, and it's preferred for him to wash his hands away from the vessel, outside the vessel. Then this is preferred to be done. As for some of the ulama who have taken this view, we mentioned the view of the Jumhur of the ulama, who have taken that position: Ata ibn Abi Rabah, Awza'i, Malik, Abi Hanifa, Shafi'i, Riwayah and Imam Ahmed. So these are the ulama who have taken this position. So many of the ulama have somewhat sided with this view regarding it is preferred to wash the hands away from the vessel. Then that's concerning. And they mentioned regarding concerning that they have taken this position based upon, they mentioned there's sarif, there's things that have taken a ruling from being something that from being a complete, than being something which is forbidden, or this command from being wajib to comply but not placing the hands to something which is disliked. That they mentioned that you have that one, that talil. So they mentioned that the reason why is because the person does not know where his hands were. So that having that doubt, not knowing where the person's hands were, then that's the reason why the ruling has been mentioned, because the person having doubt as to exactly where his hands were. So I mentioned, فَإِنْ أَحْدُكُمْ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَ يَدْ. So that kind of somewhat is of the reason that remove concerning that this hukum is not something which is wajib, that a person must wash the hands away, but something which is mustahab for him to do so and not place his hand directly into the water immediately, because that there's a level of shock. So the person is unclear. So if that person, because of that doubt, then this is the reason why that is put in place. Also, they mentioned second reason why they have come to say that that is something which is not wajib. Mentioned hatta yagsalaha thalathan. So they mentioned because they added that the Sharia mentioned that it should be washed 3 times. If there's something with the, and regarding concerning removing things of najasa, there's no set amount of times to wash the hands. So the person have najasa upon his hands, is to remove that hand, and it could mean the person washes his hand more than 3 times. So if it is restricted to 3 times, it shows that it's something which is mustahab to be done, but not wajib, that a person carrying out this act away from the vessel. So that's concerning the reason that they mentioned regarding of this and other reasons. So that's the first view. The second view on this matter, that it is wujub, that it is compulsory for a person to wash his hands before he places it into the water. It's compulsory for a person to wash his hands away from the vessel before he places into the water vessel. And of that, you have a riwayah in Imam Ahmed on this matter, and also it's the matter of the Zahiriyah. So Ali Zahir is of the view that a person is a must, that a person needs to wash his hands away from the vessel before he places his hands inside the vessel directly. And also the view taken by Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, al-Mufassir, and also Ishaq wa Ahsan al-Basri. So these are the ulama who have taken this view. There's the riwayah, a narration on Imam Ahmed, is the view taken by al-Zahiriyah, also the view by Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, and others. Of them, Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah, jami'an. And they said the reason why they have come to this view is the Zahir hadith is the apparent meaning from the hadith. So it's the apparent meaning that one takes from the hadith. But the Prophet he commanded that a person should not place his hands and not to put his hands in the water. So they said, so they mentioned that it proves something which is wajib not to do so and to comply. So they mentioned that, and also they said that, and also the reason for this is that there's nothing also to take this ruling away. There's nothing also said no sarif. There's nothing to divert that direct ruling by way of any other text to say otherwise. There's no other text to say otherwise regarding this matter. So they mentioned that anything that is mentioned regarding that ayatul wudu, not mentioned in this act, because ayatul wudu is a general command. It's a general ruling. Not, and as for specific details, then there's certain things that the ayah may not per se go into details in mentioning. So they mentioned, so there's no sarif, there's nothing that takes this ruling away from what is the apparent meaning to another meaning. There's nothing that is there regarding this. So they mentioned that becomes the rule that is wajib. Ahmed al-Hanbal rahimahullah also and the Zahiriyah, that they are all concerned that the person doing so is specific for when the person is for waking from a night sleep. So regarding concerning sleeping during the night, then this is when the person is a must upon them to do so. So they also elevate, or they also said it is restricted to, it's wajib if the person wants to do so after awaking from a sleep during the night, but during the daytime, not the case. That's concerning the view that are taken by the ulama on this matter. So Allahu Alam, regarding concerning the matter that the hadith, that there's no sarif. So the hadith is somewhat, it remains from what is apparent, that the ruling applies regarding if the person awake from sleep, he should wash his hands away from the vessel 3 times. Or wash his hands as stated by the hadith. Another of what is discussed in this hadith is the ulama discussed concerning this sleep when a person is required to wash his hands away from the vessel. Is this something which is restricted to, it is stated, is this applicable or this to be applied for any sleep or specifically for when the person sleeps during the night? So for sleeping during the night, it's specific for that case, but it is does or in general for any type of sleep. So with this matter, you find the ulama that they agree. You have a disagreement between the ulama or opinion between the ulama of the ulama who mentioned that this particular act is to be done maqsood bihi kulli yawm, is any sleep, whether during the night or the day. So the person is to wash his hands before placing them inside the vessel for any sleep. So anytime a person awake from sleep and wish to make wudu, then the first thing to be done is to wash his hands away from the vessel before putting it in the vessel. This is to be done at any sleep, whether during the night or during the day. And that view is taken by the Jumhur of the ulama. And amongst them, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, and also Imam Shafi, rahimahullah. And also the view of the Zahiriyah and Ibn Hazm. So the view of the Zahiriyah and Ibn Hazm that state that a person for any sleep that a person awakes, then it's the person should wash. It applies to whether they sleep during the night or during the day. Even though they mentioned that, so that view of the Jumhur also, so that's concerning that matter. The second view that I mentioned, that this particular practice is to be done when the person awake from sleep during the night. So any sleep during the night, then this is applied. As for during the day, then that's not the case. So they mentioned, so they put as restriction regarding that this is applied. This applies to sleeping during the night. As for during the day, is not applied. So that's the view that is Rawai and Imam Ahmed. That's the Rawai and Imam Ahmed rahimahullah on this matter. So Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, that more inclined toward the view that this is specific to sleep during the night. They mentioned that it mentioned a hadith, فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِ أَيْنَ بَاتَ يَدُ. So mention bata from baytuta, where the person slept. That's concerning that relates to sleeping during the night. So that's baytuta is regarding sleeping during the night. So this hadith applies to the person who slept during the night. So that's the view that is taken by some of the ulama. So those who mention that it is sleep, it applies for both. There's no difference between the night or sleep difference. That this they can respond to that part regarding the night regarding that's concerned that is even more required. So they mention that is more required, but the same thing applies across the board. But even a person should more so do so more during the night sleep. That's concerning the view that the Jumhur of the ulama. But I'll mention that of those who all that it applies to specifically to the night sleep. Of those who mentioned Ahmed bin Hanbal and also Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz is of that view. So Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz that is more regarding that view. So that's concerning that view. But the ulama mentioned a person can follow about the bab of ihtiyat. The person can take the safe way on this matter. So the person, the safe way, the person in any sleep, then wash off the hands. Concerning that Sheikh bin Baz of the second view and the view regarding that applies to any sleep. So Sheikh bin Baz that more inclined towards this applies to any sleep during the night or during the day, as there is no distinction between both. So that's of the view regarding of those who try to take the safe ground, the safe route regarding if one was to sleep and awake and perform wudu, one should wash one's hands before placing them into the water or a vessel of water directly. That's concerning the safer route to take regarding that particular masala. The next masala to discuss regarding this particular hadith regarding concerning, as mentioned here by Sheikh Al-Fawzan, Abdullah Fawzan, اختلف العلماء في الحكمة. So في الحكمة regarding what's the hikmah, what's the wisdom behind this. So what's the wisdom behind concerning being told that one should, being commanded to wash one's hands before placing them into the water. Of those ulama mentioned the hikmah for this concern is something that says it's something which is understandable, one can comprehend. As mentioned, لا أدري أين بات يد. The person unclear as to where his hands were while he was asleep. So it said, no, it's understandable that a person may and could have put his hand in something which is of filth, placed his hand in something which is underneath his armpit or other places of his body. So it could be, so because of this reason, it's understandable is one can comprehend the reason behind doing this regarding washing the hands. First, so the mention is no, it is something which is ma'qul, al-mana, the meaning is understandable. It's it is something one can comprehend the reason for this. The second view of the ulama is that this command is something that the person should wash his hands before placing them in the vessel. That is something which is ta'budiyah. It is something which is the man is more something of a religious reason. So the reason is more of a religious reasons why this is being the instruction being given, and not something where it just purely based upon the person how one comprehends things, and not based upon person's reasoning or comprehension. So those who mention it is something which is ta'budiyah, and those who mention ma'qul al-mana. So you have that discussion between the ulama regarding this matter. But Allahu alam, it seems that ma'qul al-mana, something which is just an act of ta'budiyah, but also the meaning can be comprehended. It's something which is can be comprehended, and the hikmah is for of something, a meaning which is clear, and also that the one does not know where his hands may have been while he was asleep. So that's concerning that matter that they discussed as those issues. Also another issue that is discussed regarding this matter, that if the person was to place his hand directly into the water, what's the hukum of that water? So the person, after waking from sleep, and he places his hands in the water directly without washing his hands away from the water, is that water considered to be tahir or not? Also again, this matter a khilaf between the ulama. So you have a difference between the ulama on this matter. We have the ulama who hold the first view, that all concerned that is this water said to be najas, or this water still considered to be pure. What's the ruling on this water? Of the ulama who all concerned this water becomes najas. That this water becomes najas if the person was to put his hand directly after waking from sleep and then place his hand directly into the vessel of water, then this water become najas. That's the view taken by some of the ulama. And it's called of jumhur of the ulama. Of them, Ata, Malik, Awzahi, Shafi, and others who take the position. A star consider the water la yanjus. So jumhur of the ulama, all the water that is not impure. So jumhur, the majority of the ulama, all the water it is not impure. Of those who take the position Ata, Malik, Awzahi, Shafi, and others, that all of the water it is not becomes impure. As I mentioned that unless the water has been affected by either the color, taste, or smell. So the water remains pure, it is not impure, unless the water is affected by something of impurity that affects either the color, the taste, or the smell. So the water, it remains upon purity unless one of these qualities of the water changes, altered. So that's concerning the view of the Protestant, as we have mentioned before regarding aluma, that that it doesn't become impure except something of impurity is placed into it, and it affects one of those three qualities of either the taste, smell, or the color. The second view of the ulama that was annahu yanjus, that the water become impure. That I mentioned the water becomes impure. That's the call that is taken of the view concerning that mentioned by is stated the view of Ibn Jarir, also Dawood al-Zahiri, and others who have taken and said Hassan al-Basri, who have taken the position that that water is considered to be impure. So the person who places his hand into the water directly, into that container of water, then all that water become impure. That's a view that is taken by some of the ulama, but An-Nawawi rahimahullah mentioned that qawl is da'if jiddan, that the water becomes impure. He mentioned that position that is taken by some of the ulama, a minority, he ordered that view is somewhat very weak. That view is very weak. So as Jumhur all concerned, the water if it's not affected by color, taste, or smell, then it doesn't become impure. As for large body of water, large ponds of water, large like a fountain and the likes, then for sure those are not affected. Then those are not affected. So the person was still Isa concerned. Jumhur ulama paid a position the person if his hand was to be placed in the water out of either person did so either out of whatever the reason may have been that a hand was placed in the water, then that water is not considered to be impure. The water is not considered to be impure. Some of the ulama, all of the water becomes tahir, laysa mutahhir. So yeah, but this kind of water it still remain pure, but not pure enough for the person to make wudu from it. But that's concerning. But water overall that remains upon tuhuriyah, it still remains pure until one of those three characteristics of the water has been altered or been changed. So that's concerning that matter regarding this some of the ahkam that relates to this particular hadith. So these are some of the ahkam that relates to this particular hadith. So from the hadith it shows regarding that of those things that a person after waking from sleep, more so a night sleep, then a person should wash his hands. As for the hadith, it mentioned a person should do so 3 times. As we mentioned, some of the narration that mentioned twice and some mentioned 3. So the person that if the person should not exceed that 3 times, but the person is not binded to do it 3 times, as some narration mentioned twice and some mentioned 3 times. So should a person have a leeway regarding a person that should wash his hands whether twice or 3 times, then that's concerning that matter. I mentioned concerning wudu, washing the hands completely, this once is required, and that will be discussed again further. But to do it so once is the required amounts, 2 or 3 times, then that's the preferred amount of time to be done. It's preferred for the limbs that they are washed twice or 3 times, up to 3 times, then that's their preferred amount of times for any limb to be washed. But once, if covering the entire area, then that is sufficient. So from that hadith it shows regarding that washing the hands after waking from sleep, preferable, Allah mentioned during the night sleep is even wajib, even more so to do so compared to the night sleep. But overall, in any sleep, the person should wash his hands before placing them into water. That water applied to water for wudu and also al-ghusl. Also from the hadith it shows regarding that and the reason behind that when the person is asleep, because the person does not level of consciousness, that a person may place his hand places that he's unaware of. So in the time of early days, then that even more so they sleep very close to the ground. Today you might find less, but a person regarding his own body, limbs or body parts, the person may place his hands in place that may be on his arms, between his legs, and so those things can occur while sleeping. So the person is preferred for the person to wash his hands upon awakening. So that's to show the hikmah or the wisdom behind of this act of washing the hands before directly placing them into the water. So those are the ahkam that relates to this particular hadith. The next hadith somewhat goes into several points. Even though this hadith is mentioned here, is somewhat Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, and this hadith is a longer hadith, but he used a portion of hadith. He does mention a portion of the hadith, which is a much longer hadith. So he does mention a portion of hadith that was suitable for the discussion here. That was appropriate for the discussion here. So he does mention a portion of hadith that was appropriate for the discussion here, or this masala. So that inshallah ta'ala will end regarding this particular session of today, regarding discussing Kitab al-Tahara from the book Bulugh al-Maram by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, where we were covering concerning ahkam relating to Bab al-Wudu, regarding how to go about performing al-Wudu. So we have mentioned this particular hadith and other hadith regarding al-Wudu, regarding other matters that relates to define the details of how to perform al-Wudu. So I mentioned concerning the details of how to perform wudu. So he had cited this particular hadith regarding of those things that relates to wudu. Before the person start, he should wash his hands away from the water, so as not, as they would say, to contaminate the water with this. So that inshallah ta'ala will end for today and continue next week. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر والحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.